In the gleaming halls of the Galactic Federation headquarters, a historic summit was about to begin. Representatives from the most powerful spacefaring civilizations had gathered to chart the future course of the galaxy. Grand Chancellor Zorax, a tall reptilian Zethrian, strode towards the central podium, his iridescent scales shimmering under the lights. As leader of the Federation, he carried the weight of billions on his shoulders. Esteemed members of the Galactic Federation, Zorax began, his voice amplified across the cavernous chamber. We stand at a pivotal moment in our shared history. Our peoples have achieved great progress in the centuries since this body was formed. Yet we also face grave challenges that threaten the very fabric of our alliance. Murmurs rippled through the assembled dignitaries, a mix of anticipation and unease. The Parthaxians, ethereal beings of pure energy, pulsed with agitation. The insectoid krill clicked their mandibles in rapid exchanges. Zorax raised a clawed hand for silence. We are here to find solutions, not dwell on divisions. By working together. A sudden commotion at the rear of the chamber interrupted the Chancellor's speech. The towering Moctran guards, armed with plasma lances, swiveled to face the disturbance with surprising agility for beings of their bulk. What is the meaning of this? Zorax demanded, his crest flaring red with irritation. A young Moctran officer saluted. Chancellor, we have uninvited guests. They insist on being admitted to the summit immediately. Uninvited guests. Who would dare? The answer strode through the doors, sending a collective gasp through the assembly. A small delegation of humans, flanked by a pair of armored Terran Marines, marched down the central aisle with a confidence that bordered on swagger. Impossible, hissed Prime Minister Veltok of Parthax. The humans were explicitly forbidden from attending. Similar sentiments echoed around the chamber. The people of Earth and its colonies were seen by many as a disruptive influence, too young and unpredictable a civilization to be granted a voice in galactic affairs. Although they controlled a modest territory, humanity's rapid rise and penchant for audacious endeavors had earned them a reputation as troublemakers. Leading the human delegation was a striking woman in a midnight blue uniform, adorned with the golden sunburst of the Terran Diplomatic Corps. Ambassador Ilara Vaughn had chestnut hair drawn back in a severe bun, emphasizing her angular features and piercing gray eyes. She surveyed the agitated assembly calmly, as if the ire of some of the most powerful beings in the galaxy was a mere trifle. Reaching the base of the central podium, Vaughn bowed her head in a gesture that seemed more perfunctory than reverent. Chancellor Zorax, honored members of the Federation, I am Ambassador Ilara Vaughn of Earth and the Terran Commonwealth. I apologize for our abrupt arrival. Believe me, we would not interrupt these vital deliberations if the matter was not of the gravest import. Zorax loomed over her, his wedge-shaped head swiveling to regard the human with evident disdain. You forget yourself, Ambassador. Humanity was not invited to this summit for good reason. Your species has yet to prove itself worthy of a seat at this august table. Vaughn met the Chancellor's glare without flinching. With respect, sir, the worthiness of humanity is a matter for another time. We have come before you today because we have uncovered a threat that imperils not just Earth, but every sapient species in the galaxy. An uproar swept the chamber at this bold pronouncement. The insectoid Ambassador Kratz buzzed with agitation, serrated forelimbs slashing the air. Preposterous. The humans must be delusional to make such a claim. Then you would doom us all with your close-mindedness, Vaughn retorted. She turned to address the full assembly. Esteemed dignitaries, I implore you to listen. If we do not act, and act now, there may not be a galaxy left to argue over. Grand Chancellor Zorax chittered deep in his throat, a sign of grudging intrigue. He leaned forward, resting his clawed hands on the podium. You have our attention, Ambassador Vaughn of Earth, but choose your next words with great care. This council's patience for human theatrics is in short supply. Ilara Vaughn took a measured breath. The next few minutes would determine not just her mission's success or failure, but potentially the fate of all galactic civilization. She knew it was a lot to rest on the shoulders of one young, upstart species. But if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was defying the odds. Then allow me to be blunt, Chancellor. There is a nightmare waiting out there in the darkness of space, and unless we find a way to stop it, that nightmare will devour us all. As the Galactic Summit erupted into fresh commotion around her, Ilara Vaughn stood resolute in the eye of the storm. For better or worse, the galaxy would never be the same after today. Ambassador Vaughn's declaration hung in the air like a gathering storm, the assembled alien dignitaries murmuring with a mix of disbelief and apprehension. Grand Chancellor Zorax's reptilian eyes narrowed. You speak of nightmares and existential threats, Ambassador, but offer no substance. If this is some ploy to wring concessions from the Federation. Vaughn shook her head. This is no ploy, Chancellor. My people have made a discovery that terrifies us to our core. In the outer reaches of the Orion Arm, there is a region of space that has long been a source of mystery and dread, the Shadowvale Nebula. A hush fell over the chamber. Even the most skeptical diplomats now watched the human ambassador with rapt attention. The Shadowvale had been whispered about for eons, a place where ships ventured and never returned, where strange lights and eerie transmissions hinted at something lurking in the darkness. For centuries, the Shadowvale has been a haunt of pirates and doomsday cults, shunned by all spacefaring civilizations, Vaughn continued. But 2 standard months ago, a Terran scout ship on the edges of our territory intercepted a distress call like no other. It spoke of a horror rising from the depths of the nebula, a swarm of something that devoured colonies and left nothing but silent ruin in its wake. The Zethrian Minister of Defense, a scared veteran named Kravos, leaned forward in his seat. Distress calls from the fringe are not uncommon, Ambassador. What makes this one worthy of such alarm? Vaughn tapped a control on her wrist device. A holographic display shimmered into existence above the central podium, drawing gasps from the assembly. It showed a starfield stained in eerie crimson by the gases of the nebula. And in the center, a seething mass of shapes, pulsing and writhing like a living tide. This transmission came at a great cost, Vaughn said softly. The scout ship and its crew were lost moments after relaying these images, but not before they gave us a name for this scourge: the Harvesters. The chamber erupted into chaos. Some delegates shouted accusations of human trickery. Others clamored for action, demanding fleets be dispatched to the Shadowvale immediately. The Parthaxian ambassador's energy form flared with agitation, while the Krill chittered in their strange language. Grand Chancellor Zorax slammed a clawed fist down on the podium, the resonant bang echoing through the hall. Order. We will have order. Gradually, the tumult subsided. Zorax fixed Ambassador Vaughn with a piercing stare. Let us assume, for the moment, that this threat is genuine. What do you propose, Ambassador? What does Earth want from the Federation? Vaughn met his gaze steadily. In the face of annihilation, Chancellor, what my people want is the same as any other. Survival. The Harvesters are not a threat that any one species can face alone. If we are to have any hope, the Federation must unite as never before. And I suppose Earth would expect to lead such a united effort, sneered the insectoid Ambassador Crafts. To the surprise of many, Vaughn shook her head. This is not about human ambition or glory, Ambassador Crafts. We are all at risk. Earth proposes a joint task force, combining the greatest scientific and military minds of all our civilizations. Separately, we may be devoured. Together, we may yet discover the Harvester's secrets and find a way to overcome them. A thoughtful silence settled over the assembly, the dignitaries and their aides whispering among themselves as they weighed the human proposal. After several tense minutes, Chancellor Zorax straightened to his full, imposing height. Ambassador Vaughn, you have given us much to ponder. While I still have reservations about humanity's role in galactic affairs, I cannot ignore a peril of this magnitude. I will call a recess so that each member state may consult with their governments. But barring any objections, I am tentatively minded to support your plan for a joint operation against this harvester threat. May the gods have mercy on us all if you are right about what lurks in the Shadowville." With that, the Chancellor strode from the podium, his entourage falling into step behind him. The other dignitaries began to disperse, some casting speculative glances at the human delegation as they filed out. In the days following the Galactic Summit, an uneasy alliance began to take shape. Ships and personnel from across the Federation converged on Earth, the designated staging ground for the Joint Task Force. The human homeworld became a hive of frenetic activity, its orbital stations thronged with alien vessels of every description. Sleek Zethrian battlecruisers docked alongside the bulbous transports of the Krill, while Parthaxian energy beings flitted between the hulls in flashes of prismatic light. Amidst the controlled chaos, Ambassador Ilara Vaughn found herself at the center of a diplomatic whirlwind. The proposed alliance was a fragile thing, constantly threatening to unravel under the strain of ancient animosities and competing agendas. The Zethrians are insisting on overall command of the mission. Vaughn's aide, a young man named Liam Connors, reported as they hurried through the bustling corridors of the task force headquarters. They claim their military experience makes them best qualified. Vaughn frowned, and I suppose the Krill are just thrilled about that idea. Connors shook his head. The Krill delegation nearly walked out when they heard. They're demanding equal authority at every level of the command structure. Of course they are, because that won't be a logistical nightmare at all. As they entered the crowded operations center, Vaughn was struck once again by the sheer alienness of their allies. A towering Moctran was hunched over a console, his massive fingers delicately manipulating the holographic controls. A pair of Parthaxians hovered nearby, their energy forms twisting into agitated patterns as they argued in flashes of color. And in the midst of it all, a small knot of humans worked feverishly to keep the disparate elements from flying apart. They were diplomats and soldiers, scientists and engineers, all driven by the knowledge that failure here could doom not just Earth, but the entire galaxy. Vaughn made her way to the central command table where Grand Chancellor Zorax was locked in a heated discussion with a group of Zethrian admirals. The reptilian leader looked up as she approached, his expression unreadable. "Ah, Ambassador Vaughn, I trust Earth is ready to commit its forces to this endeavor." "Earth stands ready, Chancellor," Vaughn replied carefully. "But we need to discuss the question of command structure. This mission cannot succeed without unity of purpose." "On that, we agree," Zorax said, "which is why the Federation Council has decided to place the task force under Zethrian leadership. Our forces are the most disciplined and experienced." The Krill ambassador, a chitinous hulk named Xar, slammed a serrated forelimb onto the table, leaving a deep gouge in the polished metal. "This is unacceptable. The Krill will not be subordinate to Zethrian authority." As the arguing threatened to spiral out of control, Ambassador Vaughn held up a hand. "If I may, Chancellor, Ambassador Xar, I have a proposal that may satisfy all parties." The room fell silent, every eye and sensory organ fixed on the human diplomat. Vaughn took a deep breath, keenly aware that her next words could make or break the alliance. Earth proposes a joint command, with each major species contributing a co-commander. These leaders would work together to plan and execute the mission, ensuring that no one voice dominates. It may not be a perfect solution, but in the face of the harvester threat, we must find a way to cooperate. For a long, tense moment, the assembled leaders weighed her words. Then, to Vaughn's surprise, it was the Parthaxian Prime Minister Voltok who broke the silence. "The human speaks wisdom," Voltok said, his energy form pulsing with a calming blue light. "No single species can defeat this enemy alone. If we are to have any hope, we must set aside our differences and unite as equals." Chancellor Zorax drummed his claws on the table, his eyes narrowing. "You would support this, Voltok, giving humans an equal say in our strategy?" "I would, Chancellor. In this crisis, we need every resource and perspective we can muster. The humans have already shown great initiative in uncovering this threat. Perhaps it is time we listen to what else they have to offer. Slowly, grudgingly, the other leaders began to nod. The Krill ambassador relaxed his aggressive posture, while the Zethrian admirals exchanged glances of resignation. "Very well," Chancellor Zorex said at last. "We will adopt this joint command structure, for now. But know this, Ambassador Vaughn. The success or failure of this mission will rest heavily on human shoulders. You have staked much on your species' ability to contribute. Do not disappoint us." The Joint Task Force emerged from hyperspace on the fringes of the Shadowville Nebula, a tide of starships rippling into real space against a backdrop of shifting crimson and black. At the heart of the formation, the Terran flagship Resilience gleamed like a silver lance, poised to strike into the unknown. On the bridge, Ambassador Ilara Vaughn gripped the command console as the first tendrils of the Shadowvale washed over the shields, setting the hull thrumming with an eerie resonance. Beside her, the alien co-commanders stood tense and ready, their differences momentarily forgotten in the face of the looming threat. "Sensors are struggling to penetrate the nebula's interference," reported the Zethrian tactical officer, her clawed fingers dancing over the glowing display. "But we're detecting movement deeper in, massive energy signatures that don't match any known profiles." Vaughn exchanged a grim look with her human crew. They had all seen the fragmentary transmissions, the glimpses of nightmare that had prompted this desperate mission. But to face that horror head-on, to plunge willingly into the depth of the Shadowville, it took a special kind of courage, or perhaps madness. "All ships, assume formation Delta 6, Vaughn ordered, her voice steady despite the hammering of her heart. "Sensors at maximum, weapons primed. We go in hard and fast, hit anything that moves. The harvesters aren't getting any more of our people." A chorus of acknowledgments echoed across the fleet comm, the polyglot voices of a dozen species united in grim determination. Bulbous krill destroyers surged forward to screen the flanks, while lithe Parthaxian interceptors danced between the larger vessels like motes of agitated light. At the center, the heavy hitters of the Terran and Zethrian fleets advanced in a diamond formation, their shields overlapping in a shimmering web of protective energy. Massive battlecruisers with enough firepower to reduce planets to molten slag, accompanied by swarms of fighters that darted and wove like angry hornets. As they plunged deeper into the nebula, the very space around them seemed to warp and twist, the crimson gases coalescing into hypnotic patterns that tugged at the edge of perception. Vaughn felt a mounting pressure behind her eyes, a whispering at the base of her skull that threatened to resolve into something terrible and vast. "Ambassador." The cry came from the sensor station, the Moxran officer's voice thick with dread. "Contacts ahead, multiple capital-class signatures. They're huge, like nothing I've ever seen." The tactical display lit up with a spray of angry red icons, each one dwarfing the largest ships in the Allied fleet. They moved with a sinuous grace that belied their size, slipping through the nebula's writhing tendrils like ghosts. Evasive maneuvers. Vaughn snapped, adrenaline surging through her veins. "All ships, fire at will." The void erupted with the fury of 1,000 suns as the Allied fleet opened up with every weapon at their disposal. Lances of incandescent energy and storms of torpedoes ripped through the nebula, seeking the monstrous silhouettes that loomed ahead. The harvesters responded with a barrage of their own, bolts of sickly green fire that ate through shields and hull plating like acid. Terran and Zethrian ships shuddered and reeled under the onslaught, their crews scrambling to seal breaches and reroute power to failing systems. In the heart of the maelstrom, the Resilience danced and spun, its human crew working in perfect sync with their alien counterparts. Vaughn felt a surge of fierce pride as she watched them, Terran ingenuity and adaptability meshing seamlessly with Zethrian discipline and Krill ferocity. They were buying time with blood, trading lives for precious seconds, as the fleet's sensors probed the harvester vessels for any sign of weakness. Every scrap of data was precious, each fragment of alien tech a potential key to survival. "Ambassador, I'm picking up a strange resonance pattern from the largest harvester," the Parthaxian science officer reported, its energy form crackling with agitation. "It's almost like a command signal, directing the others." Vaughn's eyes narrowed. A command ship, if they could take it out, disrupt whatever control it held over the swarm. "All ships, concentrate fire on the lead harvester," she barked. "We need to." Her words were lost in a scream of rending metal as a bolt of green fire slammed into the Resilience's flank, burning through decks and bulkheads in a cascade of destruction. Consoles exploded across the bridge, showering the crew with sparks and shrapnel. Vaughn clung to the command console as the deck heaved beneath her feet, emergency klaxons howling in her ears. Through the flickering displays, she saw Allied ships dying by the dozen, torn apart by the Harvester's relentless onslaught. They couldn't win this, she realized with a sinking dread. Not head-on, not with brute force alone. The Harvesters were too strong, too implacable. The Allied fleet was fighting valiantly, but it was only a matter of time before they were overwhelmed. Unless a desperate plan began to take shape in Vaughn's mind, a gambit so reckless it bordered on suicidal. But if it worked, if they could get close enough to the command ship. "Helm, bring us about," she shouted above the chaos. "Set a course directly for the lead harvester." The bridge crew stared at her in shock, human and alien faces alike etched with disbelief. "Ambassador, that's suicide," the Zethrian co-commander protested. "We'll be torn apart before we get within 1,000 clicks." "Not if we rotate our shields to full forward," Vaughn shot back. "Divert all power to engines and forward projectors. We're going to ram that monster right down its throat." For a heartbeat, the crew hesitated, the fate of galaxies hanging in the balance. Then, with a grim nod, the Zethrian commander relayed the orders, his voice ringing with a newfound respect. "You heard the ambassador. All hands, brace for impact." The Resilience surged forward, engines howling as it threw itself into the teeth of the Harvester swarm. Allied ships fell in beside it, Krill and Parthaxian, Moctran and Zethrian, a united front against the darkness. The Harvesters raked them with fire, stripping away shields and armor like leaves before a hurricane. But still the Resilience pressed on, the human crew coaxing every last erg of power from the straining reactors. Closer and closer they came, the command ship looming before them like a mountain of writhing metal and twisted flesh. Its hideous surface resolved into nightmarish details, pulsing organic conduits and flickering eldritch runes that seared the mind. At the last moment, Vaughn saw a shimmering fissure in the monstrosity's hide, a hairline fracture that pulsed with the same resonance they detected earlier. The weak point, the chink in the Harvester's armor. "All ships, fire everything, we've got at that fissure," Vaughn roared. "Pour it on." The Allied fleet unleashed a storm of annihilation, every remaining weapon focused on that singular point. The Resilience shuddered and bucked as its forward batteries fired again and again, the hull glowing cherry red with the heat of their fury. For a heartbeat that stretched into eternity, the command ship seemed to absorb the onslaught, its iridescent hide rippling like water. Then, with a soundless scream that tore at the very fabric of space, the fissure split wide, spewing gobbets of flaming ichor into the void. The Harvester convulsed, its sinuous form spasming as secondary explosions ripped through its innards. Across the battlefield, the other monstrosities shuddered and went still, their malevolent minds severed from the guiding will. A ragged cheer went up from the Allied fleet as the Harvesters began to drift and tumble, their glittering eyes going dark one by one. It was over. Against all odds, the galaxy had stood as one and triumphed. But the victory had come at a terrible cost. Fully half the Allied ships were gone, reduced to glittering debris and frozen corpses that spun slowly in the void. The surviving vessels were battered and broken, their crews numb with shock and grief. On the bridge of the Resilience, Ilara Vaughn slumped in her chair, her uniform stained with blood and sweat. They had won, but the price. Gods. The price. The Terran admiral was gone, along with so many of Earth's best and brightest. The Zethrian co-commander lay unmoving at her feet, his scaled form torn nearly in half by a steel beam. The bridge was a ruin of smoke and flickering lights, the air thick with the stench of death. But they had done it. They had faced the abyss and made the abyss blink. Earth and its allies had stood together, had proven themselves equals to the greatest powers of the galaxy. There would be time to mourn, to rebuild, to heal. But for now, in this moment of bittersweet triumph, Ilara Vaughn allowed herself a small, fierce smile. Humanity had taken its first step into a larger universe, and the universe would never be the same. The victory feast was a somber affair, despite the opulence of the grand concourse on Zethros Prime. Representatives from 100 worlds gathered to celebrate the defeat of the Harvesters, but the wounds of that terrible battle were still raw. Too many seats at the table stood empty, too many voices were forever stilled. Ambassador Ilara Vaughn stood at the window, gazing out at the gleaming spires of the Zethrian capital. Her dress uniform hung loosely on her frame, the fabric still bearing the faint scorch marks of the Resilience's final desperate charge. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else." Vaughn turned to see Chancellor Zorax stepping up beside her, the reptilian leader's scales glinting softly in the starlight. His eyes held a new wariness, a gravity that hadn't been there before the Shadow Veil. "Just thinking," Vaughn replied, her voice heavy with exhaustion and grief, "about all the ones who should be here. The ones who gave everything. They will be remembered," Zorax said firmly. "Their names will be enshrined in the Hall of Valor, their deeds recounted in song and story for generations to come. They died so that the galaxy might live." Vaughn nodded, blinking back the sting of tears. From her vantage point, she could see the great memorial that had been raised in the concourse square, a towering spire of interlocking metal, each fragment representing a ship lost in the battle with the Harvesters. The Terran section gleamed brightest of all, a testament to the sacrifice Earth had made. "What happens now?" she asked softly. "The Harvesters are gone, but their taint lingers. The scars they left behind. We rebuild," Zorax replied. "We take this tragedy and forge from it a new strength, a new unity that will endure long after our individual lifetimes. The old rivalries, the ancient feuds, they seem so petty now, in the light of what we face together." He turned to face Vaughn fully, his expression solemn. "Earth has earned its place among us, Ambassador. Your people's courage and ingenuity proved decisive in our darkest hour. The Galactic Federation will not forget that." Vaughn felt a swell of pride, tempered by the knowledge of all it had cost. Earth had stepped onto the galactic stage in a trial by fire, and the universe would never be the same. As if sensing her thoughts, Zorax continued, "There will be challenges ahead, of course. The balance of power has shifted, and there are those who will seek to take advantage of the chaos. But if we stand together, as we did against the Harvesters, there is nothing we cannot overcome." He extended a clawed hand, the gesture carrying the weight of millennia. "A new age is dawning, Ambassador. An age of cooperation and common purpose, with humanity taking its rightful place as an equal partner. I look forward to seeing what marvels your species will bring to the table." Vaughn clasped the proffered hand, feeling the rough scales against her skin. It was a moment she would remember for the rest of her life, the moment when Earth truly became part of something greater. "To the future, Chancellor," she said, her voice ringing with a newfound strength. "To a galaxy united." As the two leaders rejoined the feast, a hush fell over the assembled dignitaries. All eyes turned to the podium at the head of the hall, where the Prime Minister of the Parthaxian Collective now hovered. "Friends, allies, fellow survivors," Voltok began, his energy form pulsing with solemn light. "We gather here in the spirit of remembrance and renewal. The road ahead will not be easy, but we have seen what can be accomplished when we set aside our differences and work as one. To that end, The Galactic Federation has reached a decision. In recognition of Earth's vital role in the battle against the Harvesters, and as a symbol of our shared future, we hereby extend to humanity a seat on the Federation Council, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails. A murmur of astonishment rippled through the crowd, quickly giving way to applause. Vaughn felt her heart swell with a fierce, bittersweet joy. They had done it. Against all odds, humanity had arrived. Ambassador Vaughn, Voltok continued, his gaze settling on her. As the architect of our alliance and Earth's steadfast champion, the Council requests that you accept this position and guide your people in this new era of galactic fellowship. Vaughn stepped forward, feeling the weight of history on her shoulders. She thought of all those who had given their lives to make this moment possible. Admiral Weaver, Commander Zorax, countless brave souls from a dozen worlds. Their sacrifice would not be in vain. The end.